Hello, my name is Michelle and I wanted to introduce to you my BA Design graduate project called Skin Stories. This project is focused around people with skin picking disorder, and I've personally suffered with this for over a decade, which is why I decided to focus on this particular disorder and create my entire graduate project around it. This is a huge problem because it's a disorder that often makes people feel extremely alone, and I wanted to engage with the community and try and add some input as a designer to help people who have suffered with it in the same way that I have. You may have not heard of skin picking disorder. It is also known as dermatillomania, or SPD for short, and this is a condition that is linked to OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. It's currently classified under body-focused repetitive behaviors, or BFRBs. I know, a lot of letters, but these refer to recurring behaviors that are centered around the body and that are harmful or extremely difficult to stop. Just to clarify, these are not linked to self-harm and are just obsessive behaviors. A person with SPD, skin picking disorder, picks at their scabs or spots in their body obsessively. Sometimes they will spend hours in front of the mirror and not realize how much time has passed. This affects a person at various degrees of severity and is often accompanied with intense waves of guilt and shame. The Guardian actually states that 1 in 20 people have skin picking disorder and often go undiagnosed due to the shame and the guilt that is linked to the behavior. A lot of people will never approach a professional or even speak about it to a loved one because of all of these mixed feelings that they constantly experience. The only treatment that is currently available is cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT or talking therapy. This focuses on changing mental and behavioral patterns, but it often just isn't enough to help a person with skin picking disorder, as many therapists that you go to don't even know what it is and don't know how to help a person suffering with it. Seeing as it has only been recognized as a separate entity in 2013. So we have a very, very long way to find out how to help people with SPD. Now, to explain how my project evolved to become what it is today. As a designer, I've always personally preferred to stick to the 2D realm. I prefer graphic design and illustration generally as my primary mediums. However, this year I decided to go through various experimentation phases. These started out with illustration. I tried to depict the struggles of having skin picking disorder with imagery that I drew myself. Some of it was quite horrifying and unpleasant, but that was the goal. I then moved on to making different fidget toys. I thought that if I could create a tactile tool to help people with body-focused repetitive behaviors, then perhaps I could get a step further in my experimentation. I try to make things with your usual household items. Some were made with flour, others with foil, others with sponges, and eventually I decided to look for another type of material that would be more pleasant to the touch, something a little more squishy, and I discovered water beads. These are usually used as a way to water plants rather than using actual water, but I decided to make fidget toys out of them. They were very fun to play with and very fidgety, and I thought that maybe I could even take it a step further and make some jewelry with them. This, however, did not exactly go as planned. These water beads are actually very fragile, and when put onto a string with a needle, eventually fell apart. So I had enough time to take some very pretty photos with these jewels, but they were not viable in the long term. I then decided to dedicate a whole month to researching a different type of material that could be used as a different type of squishy jewelry. I tried to put together a kit for people with body-focused repetitive behaviors to put together by themselves at home and to make jewelry that would suit them. However, since I couldn't find a suitable material, the project in this area kind of fell apart. So I thought, how can I transition back into the 2D realm, but also still work with materials? I then decided to do a photography session. I put together a bunch of different materials that I put onto my skin and then used it as a self-empowerment technique. I took photos with flowers on my body, plants. I used different household items, again, trying out lentils and the likes of pasta even. I then covered myself top to toe in glitter, which was, again, very, very fun, but did not take me any closer to helping out the skin picking community. So I thought, how about I transition back into what I'm good at, which is illustration and graphic design, and add a little bit of writing into there, things that I'm good at, in order to create something that could actually help skin pickers. So my final decision was to create a self-help card deck for people with skin picking disorder. And for my inspirations, I think one of the major things that really inspired me were tarot cards. This is a tarot deck that I experimented with for a while beforehand, and I found it very interesting to work with. Some of the cards depict different major arcana tarot cards, others are minor arcana, and actually a lot of them can be used in various ways. For instance, some use it as a way to connect to the universe, as a mystical tool, but I realized that a lot of people don't see them that way. And I decided to discover another use for tarot cards. I found that they are actually very helpful to connect with our subconscious mind and look at a problem from an outer perspective, using the imagery as a way to reconnect our thoughts and what goes on in the subconscious mind. This was very interesting, so I decided to look at different cards that were available out there on the market. I found that there was nothing available for people with body-focused repetitive behaviors, or skin picking in particular. There was a clear gap in the market for this. However, the closest thing I found were affirmation or mindfulness cards. This is an example of them. This was a very interesting deck that was quite helpful for a while. I tested it and I found that my mentality was a lot more positive over time. It gives you just an area to focus on, and on the back there's a small description that allows you to get deeper into that particular area throughout your day. I then looked at cards that were more self-help focused and found a CBT deck. This was also very helpful. The cards themselves are much shorter and detail particular areas, again, that you should focus on throughout your day. They can be laid out around the house or taken with you as a constant reminder. I found that these were very helpful in improving my mood throughout the day, especially when I was focusing on a specific aspect. These were actions and tips that were detailed in the cards were particularly helpful, as well as the mantras that could be included in them, and helped me repeat something throughout the day so that I never lost focus or track of what I was doing. These were all elements that I then decided to include in my own deck. For now, for the final product of what I created, it was actually split into 4. I had the card deck that I created, an Instagram account that was a way to communicate with the community of skin pickers and people with body-focused repetitive behaviors. I also had a set of interviews and a Kickstarter, which evolved as a bonus of this whole project and took even me by surprise. The deck is actually a set of 20 cards illustrated by me. It's created specifically for skin pickers and was inspired by interviews of people all around the world, some close in the UK, others on different continents. This card deck includes an instruction card to tell people how to use it and will be packed in a tuck box. All of this printing process is going to be funded through Kickstarter, which has now reached £1,000, which was double what I was expecting it to, and the printing will be shortly underway, hopefully expanding into something bigger than I even expected it to be. So each card from this particular deck has a few parts. The title, which is inspired by tarot, some of the cards in tarot are called the likes of the Star, the Sun, Temperance. I used this as a template for my own cards, with some cards being called the Bathroom, the Patient one, or the Solace. Then it includes an illustration that is bright but also mystical and includes parts of the interviews that I had with people. Some of the elements actually inspired the illustrations themselves. Of course, these were all aiming for positivity and clarity, much like the color scheme and the illustrations, which I try to keep as bright and positive as possible. Now, the written part of the cards is on the back side, and it is again broken into 3 parts. There's a question, an action and a focus, and a mantra, again, which I found very helpful when I was discovering other cards and thought I would include them in my own. The decks can be used in multiple ways. One of them is a discussion tool. The imagery can be used as a prompt, and the backside of the cards can help open up group discussion on the difficult topic of skin picking disorder, and can, for instance, be used in larger circles or in smaller groups, especially helping individuals who may have difficulty talking about this issue with other people. These cards can also be used as a self-help tool. Consistent use can help create a very positive mindset, and the more visible and more used the cards, the more effective they are. For instance, they can be picked up every morning, a new card or a couple of cards, and taken with you during the day, or they can be laid out in specific places in the house to help you focus on very specific aspects depending on which area of the house you're in. They also include tips and tricks that I have accumulated from the community over the interviews that I've had over the past couple of months, and these are also very helpful for skin pickers that may not have as much information available to them out there. Lastly, these cards can be used as a reminder. Skin picking disorder is a very, very lonely experience for many, and I think one of the most frightening things is feeling like you're fighting it in solitude. Every card in this deck is a reminder to the person that is holding it that there's someone else on the other side of the world struggling with the same issues. It's basically a way to say that you are not alone. So another aspect of the project was the Instagram community. Considering I had done an experimental phase of photo shoots beforehand, I decided that I would use those as a tool to reach out to them. I'd identified a skin picking community beforehand, which existed on Instagram and other social media, but I decided to focus on Instagram in particular. I had wanted to reach out to them for a long time, but I didn't really know how, and this project gave me the perfect excuse and the perfect way to get myself closer to them and to understand them better. So I used Instagram as a bridge to get to those people who are struggling with skin picking disorder and have conversations with them no matter where they were across the world. I created a curated spread on Instagram using photos that I had taken beforehand and adding new ones in, and shared my own problems, showing a very vulnerable side of myself, hoping that perhaps they could open up in return and perhaps take part in my project. It was very difficult to organize interviews, and I had not anticipated how hard it would be to create 20 sets of interviews with people. I had to reach out to them using various manners. I had to send out messages, videos explaining my project. I reached out to whole communities of people. I reached out to foundations, and I asked them whether they would want to participate and whether they would want to have a short chat with me over Zoom. I had obviously prepared a set of questions to have this conversation with them. And this comes into the second part of my project, which is the interviews themselves. So the interviews, of course, are the core of the project. Everything revolved around them. The 20 cards were formed in a very specific way, each individual story at the core of a card. This involved me scheduling Zoom meetings with a set of pre-prepared questions, as I said, and they focused on the interviewees' life experience and the way that they suffered with skin picking disorder from childhood. Obviously, I had to improvise some of the questions to go with the flow of the conversation and to really understand each individual story. Ethics was obviously considered because it's a very sensitive subject. The brief of the project had to be explained to each interviewee beforehand, and I had to have some of the conversations last over 2 hours in certain moments. Some interviewees got very emotional, and it was incredible to see how much support the project got, even from each individual that I talked to, who were all very pleased to be participating in it and who wanted to support it as much as possible. And you know, some of the people that I talked to were from all walks of life. You had illustrators, podcast creators, founders of charities for skin picking disorder, and these were all people who had suffered with skin picking disorder. Some of them had a lot of knowledge on the subject, and others didn't even know what skin picking disorder was, and just knew that they had this terrible habit which had eaten up at parts of their lives for a very, very long time. The last part of this project was the Kickstarter. I decided that I would take my project beyond and would print the decks professionally. Obviously, this was not possible without me getting some kind of funding. And over the course of the interviews, a lot of people had called out to me and said, why don't you go and look at crowdfunding websites? And I decided that perhaps this was the way to go. Finding that Kickstarter was the most suitable for me, I wanted to fund these the professional printing of these decks and have them tested out by people once I got to that stage. So obviously I bypassed the goal, and I was very, very surprised at this. Within a week, I achieved the double of the actual goal, and I'm even considering taking the project further by perhaps taking it out to a publisher or creating even more decks that are inclusive of other BFRBs and other issues that people are struggling with. So all in all, this project has been very exciting, and my year has been a series of ups and downs that has led me to the creation of this deck, which I hope you enjoy as much as I do. Thank you very much.